This daily dose is brought to you by Pirate.Black. ARRR!
The idea of privacy has had a checkered history. But in the modern period, it has often been thought of as sacrosanct, that an Englishman's home was his castle. The idea of rights grew from the notion that some parts of us were inviolable, off-limits, private. Some theorists have argued that having a private place, a private space, off-limits to infringement is crucial to thinking through, formulating and debating the ideas necessary to have a functioning deliberative democracy. In the year 2000, a group of scientists at the Georgia Institute of Technology worked on a project called ARRR. It aimed to study something they called ubiquitous computing, a home full of different types of sensors designed to predict the needs of the inhabitants and make their lives easier. But, the researchers naturally assumed, the data would belong only to the people who lived in the house. The purpose of the data was to make their lives easier. Meanwhile, Google was also realizing it was in the data industry. If their job was to predict what people wanted, the more data they had about people, the more effective they'd be. Google's mission statement was to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. This applied to organic search and to advertising. To match companies to consumers, to make advertising more efficient and relevant, Google needed to expand how they captured data. Google's chief economist, Hal Varian, explained that the Google model was based on what they called data extraction and analysis. Through better monitoring, personalization, customization, and continuous experiments, this was the key to big data and better prediction. Larry Page had said that the problem with Google was that you had to ask it questions. It should already know what you're going to ask. Varian said that each user left behind them a trail of breadcrumbs that Google euphemistically called data exhaust. He wrote that every action a user performs is considered a signal to be analysed and fed back into the system. In 2001, Page had said that
sensors are really cheap, storage is cheap, cameras are cheap, people will generate enormous amounts of data. Everything you've ever heard or seen or experienced will become searchable. Your whole life will be searchable.
Search, Google's primary product, they realised, was about predicting what a person wanted at any given moment before they searched for it, and the clues to what the user wanted were often found away from what they were typing in a search box. Google wanted to know what users wanted before they knew what they wanted, and what they wanted might vary between geographic locations, with the weather, depending on who they were talking to, what their past searches were, what mood they were in, what they were doing at the time. And so Google began investing in collecting all of this data exhaust. They invested in email, mapping, street view cameras, built free word processors and spreadsheets, calendars, travel and photo storage, home speakers and thermostats, anything that could tell them something about their users' interactions with the world. They started placing cookies on users' computers that could track them across third-party websites. In 2015, one study found that if you visit the 100 most popular websites on the internet, you would collect 6,000 cookies tracking your online journey. Google had cookies on 92 of those 100 sites, and 923 on the top 1,000 sites. The study concluded that Google's ability to track users on popular websites is unparalleled, and it approaches the level of surveillance that only an internet service provider can achieve. They use hundreds of signals to predict what a user wants to see at any given moment. One study found that a single Google Nest device connected with so many other services and products that a user would have to read through almost 1,000 terms and conditions and privacy policies. Another found that it would take 76 days to read through each policy that affects us every year. Google purchased a satellite imagery company called Skybox that could capture such detailed images that, if outside, it could see exactly what was on your desk. They started investing in Street View camera technology that went on backpacks and snowmobiles and boats to capture places that couldn't be reached by car. They started a project called Ground Truth that analysed, through deep mapping, what they called a logic of places, tracking the paths people would take, the ponds people would sit at, what the traffic was like, which parks people used, which buildings were entered at which times and which areas were busier than others. The Street View cars collected data from open Wi-Fi networks as they went around the world, including data from people's homes. A long list of countries, from the UK to Japan, complained. In Germany, residents could require that their homes be blurred out. Harvard professor Shoshana Zuboff has argued that we live in a new economic order that claims human experience as free raw material for hidden commercial practices of extraction, prediction, and sales. This is the foundation of a new surveillance economy in which our privacy is progressively invaded through a flood of new and smaller sensors, cameras, microphones and devices attached to dishwashers and ovens, smart speakers and doorbells in shopping malls and shops, restaurants and stadiums. Tarnoff compares data in the 21st century to coal in the 19th century. It powers a revolutionary change in the economy. Data becomes the raw material that can be transformed into an asset to sell to advertisers. Smart beds that track sleep positions and sells us different bed sheets, new running shoes after a slow run, vacations after a stressful day, bad news when we're angry, and celebrity gossip when we're bored. Click patterns are measured, microphones listen to the most minuscule of details, and food choices are used to predict health patterns. Zuboff argues that surveillance capitalism is always searching for new supply routes, new devices, and new ways of collecting new types of data about our lives. She says that this manifests in a logic of extension outwards into as many areas of life as possible: your fridge, blender, dishwasher, bloodstream, and a logic of depth downwards into richer, more accurate and more detailed measurements about your emotions, personality, sweat levels, temperature, hormone levels, through digestible sensors or correlations between things like mood and music and film choices, or the inflection and decibel levels of your voice while having certain conversations with certain people at certain times. All of this is to measure in order to predict how we might act in the future, and when combined with advertising or the delivery of news or information to click on, is about subtly nudging us into action. Our present state is unceasingly measured so that future attention can be grabbed, stolen. Surveillance assets act as the raw material for digital fortune telling. According to Zuboff, the tentacles of surveillance capitalism nudge, coax, tune, and herd behaviour. Targeting our desires is like casting a net, leaving a hook in the right place, with just enough bait, with the right wording, the right photo, at the right time, in the right location, while under the influence of the right emotion to nudge us towards the highest bidder for our attention. Zuboff says that users were no longer ends in themselves, but rather became the means to others' ends.
follow the treasure to pirate.black, because financial privacy today is freedom tomorrow. Ah!